I wish I had been there on the Mumbai VT station that night of 26 November, and I had one 303 rifle with a couple of cartridges. I would have saved the entire Maharashtra ATS. So when the inquiry came out after the 26/11, they found that many of the policemen had not fired a shot in like decades. Empires are built on guns. It's not built on non-violence. Boots were not bought, bulletproof jackets were not bought, helmets were not bought. 20 years.
Wow.
They've been waiting to buy a CQB carbine for 20 years.
Welcome to Another Defense. In midst of all this war and conflict that's been going on in this world, there was some very heartening news that broke, I think, late last week. The Kalyani Group's Bharat Forge, a private sector limited company, has emerged as the front runner to supply the Indian Army with around 4 lakh carbines, small arms basically. The company has emerged as what is known as the L1 bidder in what the army in a tender contract the army has rolled out. There are still some formalities to go, but I think we can take it for granted that this company will be getting this contract. The company will essentially be manufacturing and delivering carbines that have been designed by the DRDO, India's DRDO. The reason I say it's very heartening is because the topic of Indian-made weapons, indigenous weaponry, has been a consistent theme in our defense, all during season 1, season 2, and also during season 3 at some point. And as well, the topic of small arms has been a focus area on both season 1, season 2, and it's going to be on this episode of season 3 with Sandeep Unnithan. Hey Sandeep, hi, how are you?
Hey Dave, good to be back.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So like I was saying, Sandeep, this one question that I have, how the hell does India not have its own damn rifle, has been a question I've asked on season 1 to Abhishek Balla, on season 2 to Shivarur, and I'm so glad I can ask that question to you as well on season 3.
Right. Small arms, big worries.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's going to be the theme of this episode. We'll obviously talk about the Bharat Forge deal a bit later on this episode, but we'll first obviously talk about the larger small arms landscape. And I want to be clear for our listeners and viewers, when I talk about this topic, I don't mean that India does not have any advanced weaponry in this field at all. Because when it comes to your special forces, when it comes to your units like the NSG, or when it comes to the SPG, for example, when it comes to the commandos, even the local police, you have fairly high-tech weaponry, all of it imported, sadly. But the focus area, I feel, as somebody who's been doing this podcast for a while, should be the large-scale development of your basic rifle that is given out to every infantry soldier, and very importantly, will eventually end up in the hands of your armed police as well. It's not just, by the way, the military that uses rifles. It's everybody. It's all your armed polices, right? So that's what we'll cover on this episode. But Sandeep, first, I want you to break down the landscape of small arms. So it's very not confusing, but it's vast. You have rifles, you have carbines, you have shotguns, you have your pistols. So what is this landscape when it comes to, when we're talking about military, what kind of small arms are we looking at? And especially the jargon of something like 5.656 into 45 mm or 7.62 into 39 mm. The first one is used in relation to the INSAS rifle. The second one is used in relation to the AK-47 rifle. So when we talk about this, terms like these will come up. So let's break them down for our listeners and viewers first. Break down the small arms landscape for us.
Well, small arms in India, we're one of the largest militaries in the world, more than 1 million strong. Indian Army, you have the Central Armed Police Forces, the paramilitaries, which are another 1 million. So that's straight away, it's 2 million people, right? And these troopers, these soldiers need weapons. And the basic unit for any soldier or any trooper or any paramilitary trooper is a firearm, is an assault rifle. It's a rifle, right? So we are one of the largest users of small arms anywhere in the world. There are probably very few other militaries of our size, the Chinese, possibly North Koreans, and of course, India. And now the thing with small arms, Dave, is that we've followed a rather confused policy of late with regard to small arms. Earlier on, post-independence, it was pretty clear, right? You had one caliber, you had one rifle. Most people used that rifle. That was a 303 rifle, right? The trusted Enfield 303. Then, post the 1962 war, we suddenly realized that the bolt action Lee Enfield rifle was not enough to stop the Chinese, because the Chinese came with carbines that were self-loading, which means that you could fire successive shots.
Okay.
Whereas in our case, you had to manually cycle each round in, like that. So those of you who've seen an 303, you'll get it. So every bullet you have to fire, to manually cycle the next round in, fire. So that was very cumbersome. So that's when the self-loading rifle made its debut, which was the FN FAL 7.62 into 51 battle rifle that was used by NATO. We went for that. In fact, that was the first big small arms overhaul that India saw post the 1962 war. Because until then, we were very happy using the British hand-me-downs, right, from the Second World War. In 62, all of this changed. We felt the need to go in for a modern battle rifle. That's where the SLR came in. It's a very competent rifle. And so is the 303, mind you. It's just that it doesn't fire quickly enough, right? It's a good old traditional rifle that was good in the First and Second World War. It's a damn good sniper rifle. I'll come to that later. Then you had something like a Sterling carbine for close quarter engagements. I mean, that's not a primary weapon, it's a secondary weapon. And you had pistols, semi-automatic pistols and all. All of this came into the 1960s. Then as the years went by, now the most important thing is that all of these were government monopolies. It was only made by the erstwhile ordnance factories, right, under the Ordnance Factory Board. So you had 39 factories at one point, and a couple of years back, the factories were reconstituted under different corporations, which is what it is, about 5 or 6 corporations. Now, we come to the 80s, when the army suddenly felt that the army went into counterinsurgency in Op Pawan, Sri Lanka. It was fighting insurgency in Punjab and in Jammu and Kashmir. And they suddenly realized that the SLR is too bulky, right? You're looking at close quarter battles, which are just about 200 meters, 100 meters. The SLR is made for longer ranges, for longer target engagement ranges. So you're looking at close quarter battle. And you are suddenly hit with a new weapon, a new old weapon rather, which has been around since at least the 1950s, which is the AK-47. So when the Indian Army went into Punjab, into Jammu and Kashmir, into Sri Lanka, they found their adversaries who were guerrillas, militants, terrorists, all of them equipped with this fantastic Soviet assault rifle, which could fire out 30 rounds in a burst, and you could rapidly reload. Damn good, reliable weapon. You could drop it in mud, water, whatever, and it would still fire. Wow. Extremely reliable weapon. And that's when suddenly said, the SLR isn't working. So the army went to a new rifle, which was the INSAS. Now, there was also some other thing of following what NATO was doing, which is to go in for a smaller caliber weapon. So actually, the thing is, it's not so much about the rifle as much as it is the bullet that the rifle fires. So that's the basic thing, yeah. So it is, you had the 303 round, which is a little bigger than the 7.62 into 51 battle rifle round. They're more or less the same. So the 7.62 rifle round is what the army chose after 1962. And then you come down to the 80s when you're faced with the AK-47, which fires a shorter round, a 7.62 by 39 round, right? The 7.62 is, of course, the width of the cartridge, and 39 is the length of the cartridge, right? So you have a 7.62 by 39, but a shorter cartridge. And this is what they come up against, and they say, look, we want a smaller cartridge. So then they go in for the INSAS family of rifles. The DRDO starts designing 3 weapons for the INSAS to replace each of the Indian Army's, the light machine gun, the Sterling carbine, and your good old SLR. So these are 3 INSAS weapons. There's an INSAS LMG, light machine gun. There's an INSAS assault rifle, and there is a INSAS carbine. Now, all 3 fire the same cartridge, 5.56 by 45. So you have these 2 parallel streams. While the INSAS is in development through the 80s, the Indian Army goes in for off-the-shelf imports of AK-47s. They go to all the former East Bloc countries. And here's the interesting thing, that we've had such close relations with the Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation. Now, one of the unique aspects of all countries which have had close ties with the Russians is that they've all got an AK-47 making plant, right? Somehow we never got one
Until very
until
recently.
very recently, right? So we bought AK-47 type rifles. I call them AK-47 type rifles
Okay.
because they were not actually AK-47s. As in the AK-47 made by the Russians or the Soviet Union. These were all copies of the AK-47 that were manufactured in Hungary, Romania, Poland, Bulgaria, East Germany, erstwhile East Germany, all of these countries. So Czech Republic. So we got all these AKs from all of these other satellite countries, former Warsaw Pact countries, but we didn't buy in from the Russian Federation. So you had this diverse arsenal of AKs from every country of Eastern Europe that was there through the 80s and the 90s and 2000s as India fought, counterinsurgency operations in Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab and all that. And meanwhile, the police also start getting AK-47s, Type 56s, all manner of things. So it's actually a big khichdi of weapons. Now the INSAS also makes its debut somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it is attacked uniformly by the Indian Army because they find issues with it, quality control, the plastic breaks, the magazine breaks, the butt. So initially it had a lot of problems.
Okay.
These kind of got sorted out later on as the numbers increased. The production numbers are over 1 million rifles were, manufactured and delivered to the Indian Army. So, and you come to the 2010s when the Army suddenly feels that we need to replace both the AK-47 type rifles and the INSAS rifles. So we need more rifle procurements, So it's actually a very muddled kind of procurement process if you see it. And I think it is primarily because we've not been able to decide the cartridge. What is the cartridge that you need to fight your wars? Now, most countries of the world, what they do is they have a single rifle cartridge, right? The US uses the 5.56x45 NATO. It's now moving on to a new round, a heavier round, which is a 6.8 cartridge. It's a bigger round. France has similarly got a 5.56x45. The UK has got a 5.56x45. The Chinese have got something very similar to a 5.56x45. The Russian Federation has got a 5.45, which is a very unique Russian cartridge. So all of them standardize everything on one rifle cartridge. But in our case, now this is the scary thing. We are the only major army in the world which has all three rifle cartridges in service at the same time. So we have the 7.62 into 51, which is your SIG Sauer, the SIG rifle, which we imported from the United States, about 150,000 of them. You have the good old AK-47, which is still in service, 7.62 into 39. That's there. You also have your INSAS, which fires your 5.56x45. But the INSAS cartridge is a little different. You can fire an INSAS cartridge in an INSAS weapon, but you can't use it for a NATO weapon. But you can fire a NATO cartridge with a INSAS thing. Okay. So they have modified the ammunition in such a way that you couldn't use INSAS rounds. It's a little longer than your standard NATO thing. So enemies can't use our ammunition, that kind of thing. But so the whole thing is that it's a very muddled procurement process, primarily because you haven't figured out we need to get one bullet, stick with it. So what other armies do is you'd ask, but everyone has different requirements. Exactly. Yeah. So the thing is that you change the barrel length. If you have a close quarter battle thing, you have a shorter barrel. You have a 6-inch barrel or an 8-inch barrel. You go in for longer engagements, you go in for a proper assault rifle kind of thing or a battle rifle, a longer barrel length, So these are things that other armies do, but somehow we have said that no, we will have this zoo of different calibers. That's a serious problem because, we sit here and we talk about these things, but when you go to the front, you actually realize that could be a serious problem because warfare is not what we imagine it is. When you go there, you see the conditions in which the soldiers are, the trenches they are in, the bunkers they are in, and you realize that it's not brightly lit spaces like this.
Right.
They're very dim. They have to be dim, right? Because you don't want the enemy to start shelling you. So in such spaces, if you have multiple weapons, multiple calibers, you could end up loading the wrong rifle into the wrong cartridge into the wrong rifle or something, or there would be chaos in a battalion, for instance, which has more than one caliber. There would be, and you have sniper rifle cartridges, you have pistol ammunition, you have submachine guns, so all different. So there would be something like 5 or 6 different cartridges in any infantry battalion's coat, the armory. So this is a big issue that we've had, and I think it's primarily because everyone saw that small arms, no big deal. It's just like it's like the small eats. Yeah, it's like chivda, chips, that kind of thing. It's not the main course. Main course is all the big tanks and the fancy aircraft and stuff. But we haven't paid enough attention to this. And I think that kind of shows in the procurement that we've had. So it's like literally you have paramilitary forces going and buying their own things. You have the infantry which buys its own, the Indian Army's infantry that buys its own weapons. You have police units that go and buy their own weapons. So there's no standardized... And the thing is that they're all buying the same or similar categories of weapons, but from different suppliers.
Yeah.
So there's also an issue of the unhappiness with the ordnance factory products, where, like I mentioned, the INSAS was a test case. So in the beginning, there were major issues with the INSAS, but later when you came down to mass production, they managed to iron out a lot of the glitches. They in fact even introduced a very advanced version of the INSAS about a decade ago, but that was rejected because the army changed its caliber. So the whole thing is the game is about the caliber.
Yeah.
So that's where we are today in 2025. The only major army in the world with multiple rifle calibers. So you have the AK-203, which is going to enter production. That is going to be like your standard caliber.
Yeah.
That's your 7.62 into 39 round. And you have your SIG Sauer, which they've bought about 150 odd thousand from the United States. That's also going to be in service. And you will have your NATO standard 5.56x45. So 3 calibers in service for the near foreseeable future, 10, 15 years or so, until maybe a 4th caliber comes in.
That's a bit like the Indian Air Force's fighter fleet, actually. You have planes from all over the place with their own unique spare parts. And
everything is different. So, these are things that when I've been talking to soldiers and designers and all that, they realize this is something called muscle memory, And this was told to me by one of the designers of one of the new battle rifles that the DRDO done called the Ugram, which is a collaboration between the DRDO and a private sector company called Lokesh Machines. My mistake, it's not Lokesh. It is another company from Andhra again. The name will come back to me, but they make the ASMI, the Ugram. So the problem with the weapons is that each weapon has a different cocking lever. They have a different way of holding. It feels different. So your soldier who's trained on one weapon, it'll take time for him to kind of a weapon is like an extension of your body.
Yeah.
So you should be absolutely comfortable when you're handling it. You should know exactly where the cocking lever is, where the magazine, how the magazine goes, how the weapon feels, all of those things. Those are important things. Now, the designers of the Ugram, the DRDO, said they tried to keep as much of the INSAS as possible in the Ugram, which is a new battle rifle, because majority of the Indian soldiers would probably be transitioning from the INSAS to this. So there would be very less retraining that would be required. It would be very comfortable. The only difference would be the caliber. So all of these things are really important. And again, the issue is that we haven't given enough attention to small arms.
Yeah.
For instance, the DRDO, which is supposed to design weapons and all that, it's got a very small and a very committed small arms design team. But it's very small. It's just about a handful of experts, about 5 or 6 people. That's it. That's all that we have, what we've set aside for designing small arms for the forces. And it's not just about, designing small arms for your existing requirements. You're looking at futuristic requirements. Maybe what will it look like, say, 10 years from now or 15 years from now, when body armor becomes as widespread as it is today. Probably you'll have advances in body armor, which you will then need to defeat. Yeah. Then you would need better ammunition. You would need more advanced ammunition. that kind of research is not being done to the extent it is being done in other countries.
Of course, I mean, you're not even they're at the first level where we reach that level.
So we are a little we're catching up now.
Catching up, yeah.
We are catching up, but there's a lot of catching up to do. You know, that the gap between us and the rest of the world is enormous, because while we were sleeping, the rest of the world was kind of building up. They were doing their R&D, and here we were still debating, should we bring the private sector into making small arms? And when we finally took that decision, it was just 10 years back. So 2017, when the arms rules were modified, 2016-17 is when it was modified, and they brought in the private sector. And that's how you have this new wave of very, very aggressive and hungry private sector players like SSS Defense. You have Adani Group is also there. Jindal is there. So there are multiple private sector small arms players now in the game, and they really want to make a mark. So there are some who are bringing in their own designs, like SSS Defense. They design all their weapons. They own the IP for the weapons. They design it themselves. You have the other companies which they've kind of got foreign designs. They own those designs and they manufacture it here in country under license. So the thing is that the idea is that you have as many players as possible. There's competition, and competition leads to excellence. So earlier on, you just had the Ordnance Factory Board that was making all the weapons, your small arms, and now you have a lot of private sector players, and this competition. So every time you now put out a tender for an Indian rifle, you'll get like 5 or 6 people who will bid for those tenders. Now, all of them may not get it. All of them not equally good, but there are at least 3 or 4 I can count as being really nice and good ones. Like, so the order that you were talking about, the CQB carbine, the Bharat Forge, is a case in point. It's the largest order for an Indian designed, developed, manufactured weapon in possibly 20 years or so. The last orders went to the INSAS rifle, right? And the INSAS was bought in batches of over the total order size was 1 million rifles or so, and that was bought in batches. So the last orders came in about a decade ago, and after that the facility was literally wound down. They're not making many INSAS rifles, not in the scale that they were once. So this one is a big order. It's a 2,000 crore plus order. It is going to establish Bharat Forge as a big player for small arms in the defense private sector space.
I want to stay on the point of us not having given enough focus to this aspect of indigenous weaponry, because that's something that's actually been a recurring topic on the previous 2 seasons as well when I discussed this with the respective guests. That, and also the fact that perhaps like it was with the Indian Air Force and Tejas, the Indian Army has a fair share of blame to accept when it comes to not being able to support the development of India's own rifles. So I want to thoughts on that, and also on the part about not having enough focus. Do you think this is a case of what you spoke about when we discussed the AMCA project? That this project should not be seen as a DRDO project. It should not be seen as an ADA project. It should be seen as a national security project for which everyone needs to come together. Do you think that's where we failed when it comes to the rifle? Because like you said at the beginning, you have 2 million odd people who need that ASAP. Regardless, you have your military and then you have paramilitary, armed police, etc. And forget the armed police, even your local police will have units that will need, they'll have the QRT teams because of the day and age we live in metro cities. You'll have QRT teams. And I'm from Mumbai, and I know you've covered 2611 very, very closely. So who can forget those visuals of, AK-47 terrorists being, you had constables carrying like the British era Bolt 303 rifles.
Yeah, but I have an issue there.
Oh, please let's talk about that before we. Let's talk about that. Definitely.
The much maligned 303 rifle. Now, I keep playing that. I was just talking to a friend. I was in Bombay over the weekend, and I told them, look, I wish I had been there on the Mumbai the VT station that night of 26 November, and I had one 303 rifle with a couple of cartridges, I would have saved the entire Maharashtra ATS
Seriously?
from annihilation. Yeah, because what happened is, see, the 303 is a fantastic weapon, right? It is one of the best long-range rifles ever made.
Okay.
Now, the problem is that you have someone who doesn't know how to use a weapon, who's never fired the weapon in God knows how many years. And because he hasn't fired it, he doesn't know how to keep the weapon. It's not cleaned, it's not oiled, it's not serviced. It probably doesn't even fire, right? These are all stuff that's just pulled out of the coat and just handed down for, for show. But if you had, I keep saying this, if you had one policeman who had one functional 303 rifle on the night of 26th November on that platform, and he knew what to do with that rifle, all he had to do was to go to high ground, take position, and just a couple of rounds, and the two terrorists would have been killed right there.
Okay.
And you know what happened after they exited the VT station?
Yes.
They went on, they killed 50, 60 people, they killed the Maharashtra ATS, they went into a hospital, and then finally they were caught. Kasab and Ismail Khan were caught in Chowpatty. Yeah. So they went on the shooting spree. So all it took was for one policeman with a 303 rifle. That's it. See, a 303 is not an AK-47. It's not meant for close quarter battle. It was designed for the Imperial British soldiers on the plains of, South Africa or the high mountains of Afghanistan and all that to engage the enemy at distances. So here you have a fantastic, it's like a sniper rifle. It's a sniper rifle minus the scope. So even the iron sights are good enough. All you had to do was to do that. They didn't do it. And, and unfortunately because of that, when you don't know someone who knows the craft of shooting or is it basic NCC level training, then you tend to blame the rifle. Arey yaar, iske paas 303 tha. I'm telling you, a guy who doesn't know, who has a primitive bolt action rifle and who knows how to use it, he's a good crack shot, who knows how to use a rifle, can shoot the daylights out of someone who has the most advanced weapon in the world but doesn't know how to use it, right?
Okay.
It's all about training, Dave. It's all training. It's muscle memory. It's, reflexes, all of those things. It's all thing that comes to you from using a weapon. So when the inquiry came out after the 26/11, they found that many of the policemen had not fired a shot in like decades.
Ages, yeah.
So they would be, their authorization was some 10 rounds a year.
Yeah.
And because there's such a huge police force and there's so
Budget.
little, it all comes down to that. पैसा नहीं है, ammunition नहीं है.
तो practice भी नहीं
तो
कर सकते.
practice भी नहीं कर सकते. जब practice करते public bomba bomb करती है. Firing range पे देखो ये, and the firing range is in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
You've not built modern firing ranges even. They're all open firing range. Ghatkopar police firing range. Da करके. You're not invested in this thing. You're not invested in anything. You're not invested in training. You're not invested in infrastructure. And therefore you finally sit and say, नहीं, weapon खराब था, ये अच्छा नहीं, weapon नहीं है, 303 है, ये पुराना है, that kind of thing. So you get into all of those. The fact is that, there is a colonial story to this also. If you got a minute, I'll tell you the story of.
Please.
But, my eyes were opened when I read this book called Empire of Guns by Priya Satia, right? For me, as someone who spends a lot of his time on small arms, that's like a Bible for me. Priya Satia, she's a scholar based in the UK and she's researched this book where she talks about how the British dealt with the natives in India.
Okay.
They ensured that the natives must never get the know-how to make these weapons. This must remain a preserve of the British. We must make the weapons. They must always be dependent for us on those weapons. And they would even go to the extent that if the enemies also, our enemy native princes wanted the weapons, we would sell it to them. But ensure that they don't have the mining, they don't have the mines from where they can extract the metals, the iron and the stuff that is used to build the metals to build weapons. The know-how, the forging, the casting, the precise engineering, none of that should be taught to the Indians. So this mentality kind of continued for several decades. So you saw the British going and ensuring that we didn't have access to any of this know-how and stuff, because this was, they understood, they're an empire and empires are built on guns, It's not built on non-violence. They're built on extreme violence and the need to control that violence. So you saw the reason that India has a very, very strict gun control is also colonial inheritance, right? The British had very strict gun control. for obvious reasons. You don't want the natives running around with guns because you have 100,000 armed Indians, and next thing you know, it'll be 1857. So after 1857, they really cracked down on gun ownership and made it all. So you have a colonial history, then you have the ordnance factory boards that's set up, and you have this whole thing of why do we need guns? It's nothing. But there is a science to this thing of gunsmithing. There is a precision thing to it. Metallurgy is involved. Exactly like watchmaking. People say, "Arey, HMT watch factory was shut down. Arey yaar, kya hai? Old technology." Arey, watchmaking is the acme of precision engineering. Which country would allow a HMT, a watch factory to shut down? Because that is a very, very specialized skill that you need. Similarly with small arms. But now that we've caught up, we've regained a lot of ground. I think it's really good, because when I see the new companies that are there, they're very, the way they approach the problems. There are guys who've worked in some top-notch, firms abroad. They've come back and they're now investing in these small arms designs and all that. So I think the future is bright. I'm always a glass half full guy.
I can see your passion for this topic, by the way, because you're quite into small arms. It really comes across, and I'm really glad we're having this chat then. Right. So the great tangent, by the way, because that's an insight I've never heard before about your take on how the 303 rifle could actually have taken on those terrorists.
Yeah.
So I do want to add a sort of a disclaimer note for our listeners and viewers, because we want to save you from getting bad viral content online, because we live in that age where people slice and dice. We need to be clear that the point Sandeep was trying to make was that it's all about the training and the know-how and ensuring your people have the know-how. And it's not, he wasn't really blaming the man on the ground that particular day. Hey, his fault that we could not end up stopping the attack. It was more
the system has to ensure. The system has to ensure that our people, our soldiers, our policemen, our constables on the ground get the best equipment.
Exactly.
And they get the training
Know-how
for that.
to
And
use that.
And you have to prioritize that, right? If you think that firearms proficiency is not a thing for the policeman to have, then you will be hit with incidents like this. Because let's not forget, Dave, we always talk of special forces need to come in and we need to beef up for special forces. We need to beef up the policeman on the ground, because he's the first responder. The first responder at all of those attacks in 26/11 were the policemen. Yes, and some of them performed extraordinary acts of courage. Like Tukaram Womble. He grappled with Kasab. Yeah, he was heavily armed. He took all those bullets. Yeah, he caught him alive. So you need to empower the policeman. You need to give him the best weapons, training, and you have to decide what is it that I want my policeman to carry. Should he carry a pistol, for instance? Should he carry a rifle, an assault rifle, or what kind of thing is it? If he's a first responder, then he must certainly have a sidearm. Because you're looking at somebody who's come in, to kill a lot of citizens, and the best guy on the ground is a well-trained policeman who's got a weapon, and he immediately uses it. And we've seen that in numerous terror attacks across the world as well, where there was a Fort Hood shootout where I think the shooter was this guy who got completely crazy, picked up a weapon and started. Major Nidal Hassan of the US Army went down shooting people for no reason, and there was an off-duty policewoman who just took her weapon and went and engaged him. Now the thing is that that's a very different culture there, the United States, right? Their right to carry arms, bear arms, the Second Amendment and all of that. India is a very different kind of thing. In our system, open carry is not allowed at all. It's only the law enforcement officers who can carry weapons. So because we live in such a society where citizens cannot be armed the way they are in the United States, it is incumbent upon us to give the police, paramilitary, military, the best weapons and good training as well.
Yeah, right. So great tangent, like I said. But the point I was going at before we went to 2611 was the two aspects I wanted thoughts on. One, that the Indian Army has not really been as supportive as you would want it to be. For example, on one of the previous seasons, one of the guests told me that he has heard instances of startup founders telling him that they have been crying hoarse to the Indian Army that please just allow us and give us a trial. We're not saying buy weapons from us, just demo our weapons. You take your call then, but just demo it. And the answer at some point of time has been like, we'll see. It has not been very, very encouraging. One, that. And second, like I said, the lack of focus, because small arms is not that sexy. You anyway grappling with big gas issues like, kitna fighter jets khareedna
Yeah,
hai, do you
yeah.
need to have a third aircraft carrier or not, and stuff like that. So in that, it just keeps slipping the priority list, even though, like I said, this is should be high priority, because
Yeah,
once you resolve this issue, it's for all your forces. Your
right.
thoughts on both
No,
these
no,
points?
absolutely. Very, very important point, Dave. And I can highlight the point about the infantry not getting the attention that it needed.
Yes.
The infantry soldier not getting the attention that he required. A couple of years back, I did this thing. When I was here at India Today in the magazine, and we did a audit of the procurements that are held up. That was horrific. Boots were not bought, bulletproof jackets were not bought, helmets were not bought. Assault rifles, of course, had been hanging fire. The CQB carbine, for instance. You know how old that case is? The procurement case that's just been announced.
The Bharat Forge
L1,
one.
the Bharat Forge deal. 20 years.
Wow.
They've been waiting to buy a CQB carbine for 20 years. That's like 2 decades. It's happened now. So, it didn't get the attention that it needed. It is getting it now. Thanks to some very bright people like Manohar Parikar. I mean, he came and said, "Look, this soldier is in the line of fire every single day. He needs a bulletproof jacket. Buy them, buy them, buy them." That's what he did. He just went on a thing and just cleared a whole lot of these log jams. We get so involved in processes and bureaucracies, and so there are friends of mine who've been in the defense ministry and said that when I came here as a young officer, the file for a particular weapon was that thin. When I came back the second time, the file had become the size of the old telephone directories. You remember that? And the weapon was still not bought.
Wow.
You're still going in circles and circles because I think it was a low priority. What the problem is? Bureaucratic inertia. It's like, oh, it's infantry. Oh, it's a soldier. You don't care. That kind of thing. It is very unfortunate. Things are changing now. A big push is coming from within the services. And I think the best example of that is you have for the first time a serving army officer, Colonel Prasad Bansal,
Colonel Kalashnikov.
Colonel Kalashnikov, yeah, that's what I called him. He designed the first Indian designed, developed, manufactured submachine gun. Called the
Asmi. Yes,
that's right.
yes.
Oh, you know it. Yeah, the 9x19
Yes.
submachine gun. It is a fantastic weapon. I've used it and it just does not jam.
Okay.
And now he's created a whole family of Asmis in different barrel lengths. Right. The latest one is something that has a 6-inch barrel or a 9-inch barrel, a longer barrel for longer engagements, 100 meters plus. It's got 3 variants with different barrels, the same weapon essentially with different barrels. So he's created a whole family of weapons. So that is the thing, a serving army officer designing weapons, army encouraging him, giving him orders. So there's a door in the foot. So things are changing now, but it's happening very slowly. And that point you made, it's a very valid point. Manufacturers say, look, we've designed the weapon, we've manufactured it. These are military grade weapons. You and me can't buy them, right? They're prohibited bore. The only buyers for this can be either your own military or it can be a foreign military.
Exactly.
Now you go to try and sell it to, say, a friendly foreign country, and his first question is, does the Indian Army use this weapon? So you'll say, so he said, then why should I be using it?
True that.
So here is something that the army could well do, the government should also look at it, is that don't buy 10,000 weapons or 50,000 weapons. Buy 1,000, commit to 1,000 weapons. 1,000 weapons is a drop in the ocean for an army of our size, right? You will not even know it. But for the manufacturer, the guy who puts in his money and he toils and designs a weapon and he brings it to you and it meets your parameters, about 80-90% of it. For him, it's a big deal. 1,000 gun order will give him the confidence to go and sell it to some other country.
Yeah.
So this is what other countries do. They come, they get orders from us, they go back, they plow that money back into R&D and they bring better weapons and they sell it back to us. So this whole thing, you need to encourage our startups, our industry with orders. And like I said, not 10,000, 50,000. Give a small order, 500 weapons, 1,000 weapons. Buy it, let his production line stabilize, let him expand, build stuff, try and export to other countries. So you shouldn't, again, look only at the Indian market. I mean, that, again, is a good thing where the government's saying, listen, try and export as well. Build in India, build for the world, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. We'll talk more about this, but after a quick break.
There is a much larger conflict, a much older conflict in our region that is more important than the conflict with Israel. That's the conflict between Sunni and Shia.
Yeah.
Between the
Iraq and Iran,
Shiites that
the
are
Shiites,
regarded in their own eyes as the true descendants of the Prophet, because they supported the family of the Prophet, and the Sunnis that inherited the leadership, the military leadership around the Prophet. Okay, so this fight has been going on for centuries, and what the Shiite radical regime was trying to achieve is to take Jerusalem as a conduit to take Mecca and Medina, and to become, first of all, the predominant Muslim force, the caliphate, the true caliphate, to restore the caliphate, okay, and become the true force in the Islamic world in order to then confront the West. Okay, this is their plan. This is not something I'm imagining. This is something that they planned.
So in
And
that,
they declared that they want to do.
Welcome back. Sandeep, I want to briefly talk about what I saw in the last 4-5 years during the standoff with China. I think it was at least twice, if my count is not wrong. I think maybe even 3 times, that India had to go for emergency procurement of the 6 Sauer rifle from the US. Around 67,000 the first time, and the similar order was
About
done the second time.
72,000.
So,
72, 72 batches.
Yeah, 2 batches, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, why? Good
I mean, I'll just
question.
give some context as well, because INSAS, like you said, not very happy with, but over a period of time, it had more or less improved, and the army was, I'm guessing, okay with it, even if you're not particularly happy with it. You were up against an adversary with pretty high-tech weaponry, even though you had clauses saying you cannot be even using weapons along the LSC. But yeah, you had your primary rifles, which you were pretty much okay with, but yet you had to buy on an emergency basis, and it's a bad look, by the way, right? Even on the desk when I was covering this, I was like, this does not look nice. Yeah, you're on a standoff, and you have to buy rifles in an emergency. Emergency should be like for high stakes purchases, right? Nothing like a rifle.
Well, I think that was just it's really sad. Yeah, whatever way you look at it, it's importing rifles. It's a poor showing. We imported those rifles from the US. We got the AK-203. Well, that's at least a transfer of technology, a production line that will be set up here in India. But the third thing was something that, shocked such a lot of people, that there were people who threatened to migrate from India if that order was placed. And here was an order that was going to go to a Dubai-based company for almost 500,000 CQB carbines.
Wow.
Right. They had finished as the L1 bidder for 400,000 plus carbines. And the order was about to be placed, and suddenly something triggered off in the system, and they said, why are we buying assault rifles? Why are we buying carbines from the UAE? And the UAE had just started making them less than a decade ago. It's a good product, right? It's a very good company, great engineers, good people, good weapons. All of that is fine. But the optics of it, that India wannabe superpower buying small arms from a very small country, buy something else, buy oil from them, for God's sake, or buy, but don't buy assault rifles. So at a time when your own industry is here. So the optics of that was bad, which is when they scrapped that order. And they restarted it, and that's how
The
Bharat Forge kind of
the 6 Sauer,
finished.
what happened with that?
But the 6 Sauer, it's one of those bizarre things. I can't make sense of it. It was, it was again the caliber. It was the army wanting to go in for a 7.62 by 51 caliber a weapon that fired the 7.62 by 51. They wanted it quickly. They kicked off a process in which the SIG 716 emerged the finalist. And the SIG is a funny weapon because it's not in service with a lot of armies. In fact, I think we are possibly the only major army in the world to use that weapon. So it's a bit of an oddball purchase, and we bought it twice. So it's like 150,000, and now I'm being told that it's possibly the only time that we'll buy it. But then there's also the story that SIG might actually come here and set up shop in India and build the rifle here, which is a lot better than that emergency purchase, which I still can't wrap my head around. Why would you buy the SIG 716. It just doesn't make sense. There were a lot of Indian options. You could have looked at the DRDO Ugram, but of course that came a few years after this whole process began. But you should have given Indian industry a chance. And like I keep saying, treat it as a national project. Do you want to see your army, one of the finest armies in the world, marching down Rajpath on 26 January holding imported weapons? That's like the basic, bread and butter stuff. When you're holding your, foreign rifle, American rifle, Russian rifle, thank God no UAE rifle. But I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to the UAE and fine country, great
But not for
strategic
rifles.
partners. But please don't buy rifles from them. Not at a time when your industry is hungry and waiting for orders.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about the Bharat Forge deal in a bit of a detail here now. Now the deal, I mean, it's gonna go through. They're the L1 bidder. There's some still bureaucratic loopholes to jump through, but it'll probably happen. Is what the sense that I get. So tell us, Sandeep, what this deal is all about, the story behind it, and also very importantly, what's a carbine and how is it different from a rifle?
Right. Okay. Can I let you know a secret?
Yeah.
For the Bharat Forge deal?
Yes, please.
The CQB carbine is nothing other than the INSAS carbine
my
reborn.
God. Wow.
It's come back.
Oh my God.
Okay, so long story short, like I said, the INSAS had three variants. It had an
Yes.
assault rifle, it had a light machine gun, and it had a carbine. Right. So the assault rifle was to replace your SLR, your LMG was to replace your the Bren variant that we have, the L1A1, I think it's called. And your carbine was to replace your Sterling carbine from the Second World War.
Okay.
Now, for some reason, all the options that the DRDO and the OFB presented to the army kept getting rejected. So the army said, no, it's making too much noise because, you're firing it from a shorter barrel. The carbine is basically a weapon. It's a compact,
A short
fast
rifle.
firing weapon. It's a shorter version of a rifle. So you have the classic cases like the M16 rifle.
Yes.
M16 is a full-length assault rifle. And you have the M4, which is a compact version of it, which is more like a carbine kind of thing. So the DRDO kept trying and trying and trying. The army would never buy the INSAS carbine. So they kept working on it and they perfected it to an extent that it is now, it's a fantastic weapon. And I've fired it in a range with the DRDO, and I think it's one of the best weapons that the DRDO has designed and manufactured. It's a very simple weapon. It's like an AK-47. It functions like an AK-47. It opens like an M4. It breaks open like that. It's a very best of both worlds kind of weapon. So it's actually the INSAS carbine reborn in present day, and it's finally got its orders. It's vindicated the thing. It's been 30 years of trying or 40 years of trying.
Amazing.
So finally it matched.
done,
It got all the tests. It passed all the tests, all your drop tests and your shoot tests and your range accuracy, everything. It's made ticked all the boxes, and it's finally L1.
Yeah.
So
how does Bharat Forge come into the picture?
Well, Bharat Forge, like I mentioned, is a lot of private sector interest in getting small arms going. And Bharat Forge started small initially. Very interestingly, they were the manufacturing partners for the weapons like the JVPC, the Joint Venture Protective Carbine, another DRDO attempt to get the army to buy a carbine, right? So the Bharat Forge was the manufacturing partner. They made small numbers of these JVPCs and the CQB carbine. And that's when they kind of figured that, look, this is a potential thing for us. They're a very good company. They make everything. Today, they are the only company in the country outside of the ordnance factories, the erstwhile ordnance factories, that make everything from pistols all the way up to 155 by 52 howitzers. So, the interesting thing about the Bharat Forge deal is that in the past, all the complaints have been about, not so much about the design of the weapon, but about the manufacturing.
The QC, basically.
That absolutely, the quality control issues that the INSAS faced, as in the poor plastics and metallurgy, barrel fatigue, barrel broke, this happened, that happened, all of those things. The government has said that, okay, let the private sector in, and this was a test case of that. You have a DRDO designed weapon manufactured by the private sector. So that's like, public-private partnership kind of thing. So Bharat Forge is not yet into the design game. They haven't started designing small arms. They will eventually, in a few years. Give it some time. But this is a perfect partnership. The public sector, DRDO, basically sits and designs a weapon, because that's what they are basically. They're a design lab, and the private sector, which is got the economies of scale and all, they can manufacture it in large numbers and ensure that quality stays from the first weapon right up to the 4,45,000 weapon, 4.5 lakh weapons. So this is something that has been tried off late in the Pinaka project, where you had the Tatas and who was the other partner for the Pinaka project? Oops, there were two.
It wasn't L&T, right?
Was it L&T? Oh God, it's been that long. Well, the Bharat Forge was not there. It was in the Attacks deal. You had two companies again. You had L&T and you had Tata Power SCD. Two companies that produce. No, actually, it was in the Attacks. That's the Advanced Towed Array Gun System. You had Bharat Forge and you had Tatas.
Okay.
Making two different sets of prototypes and then getting the order, splitting the order amongst themselves. So that's the concept that they started here. Of course, here it's a small arm. It's not that complicated. So one company can make it quite easily. So which is how Bharat Forge is finished here as the L1. So it's a very big deal for a private sector company to break into this. I mean, it's the largest deal. Like I said, it's the largest small arms deal placed on an Indian company in decades.
Yeah.
And it is the biggest small arms order on the private sector.
Yeah, right. Which brings me to my final point on this episode is the future landscape. Season 4, Season 5, Season 6 of Inner Defense. I don't know if I'll be hosting it, but whoever is. Do you think this question of why does India still not have its own damn rifle, will it continue, or do you think we are on the verge of reaching that point where you've sorted sort of this mess out?
I think we were close to sorting it out, Dave. I think from the kind of the awareness now in the government that small arms, we need to build our own, buy our own, design our own. That awareness, and a lot more private sector players coming in. The interesting thing is that when I got the news of the Kalyani order, the Bharat Forge order, the first call came to me from someone in government saying that, hey, this order has been placed and this is the thing, and because of your interest in small arms, I thought I'd let you know. The second call was from someone who hadn't got the order, private sector guy, but he was equally delighted. And he said, look, it's such a big deal for us. It's a big day for us in the private sector that an Indian company has got this order. I did not want to see a foreigner get this order. And today I'm vindicated. So it opens the door up to enormous possibilities. It is quite possible that there could be partnerships here. Some work could be offloaded. Other companies could get in. The most important thing is that you're creating an ecosystem of making small arms. Now, exactly, I go back to the Maruti Suzuki story, right? Where you got this automobile know-how into the country 4 decades ago. And based on that model, you created an entire automobile ecosystem.
Yes.
Right? Today, we are very good at making cars. We design our own vehicles, and the engine isn't still an issue, but
the engine.
The engine always is.
Jets 2 cars, the engine.
It's always the engine. No, but we are on our way to designing our own engines at some point.
As well, yes.
No, but the thing is that to set up that ecosystem, you need to place those orders. And when you place orders on Indian companies, they start procuring. They look for suppliers.
Yes.
They set up supply chains. They start procuring from those supply chains. And then you have production lines that are set up. And then this company gets the confidence. Now look, imagine Bharat Forge has got this order. He is such a big player in the world. Everybody in the world is looking, who is this company that's got an order for 500,000 weapons almost? 400,000 is just about 100,000 short of 500,000, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of weapons. People are going to sit up and take note. And I said, let's look at Bharat Forge for some deal that we can do. Let's tie up with
Or
them.
let's invest in them.
Or
Give them money.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's good for Indian business, and this is where I think we've been so late in this game, and it's so tragic that in all the orders that we've placed on foreign companies, we've killed our private sector. We've taken away from our private sector. We've underinvested in our private sector. We have subsidized the foreign private sector.
Yeah.
By all these orders are placed on these foreign companies who are actually private sector companies. No government makes weapons. It's all in the private sector. And here we've realized so late in the day, after like 35, 40 years after liberalization, we've still, maybe it's a good idea to get the private sector in defense, no? We should increase the FDI in defense. What do you say? So we're still playing this game after 4 decades. Boss, the world has moved on.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, like that's very basic economic sense. I mean, if the government shows, because the government is any day is going to be the biggest buyer of anything in this country.
Yeah.
And if it shows an interest,
Especially weapons.
especially weapons.
You and me
in
aren't
India,
going to
definitely,
run around with
exactly,
tanks
Mumbai.
and firearms.
Exactly.
Yeah?
So if it shows interest, that's gonna, like, if I want to set up a business in the defense manufacturing industry, for example, I need to be even like have that 1% hope that अच्छा एक दिन ना government मुझसे खरीदेगा.
Yeah.
One, I won't even bother
एक
thinking
दिन
about.
क्या यार, the guy lives from business cycle to business cycle, quarter to
Exactly.
quarter यार. तो क्या एक दिन मर जाएगा आदमी.
Exactly. Right. I actually want to ask a couple of more points on this topic before we end this. So that's your basic rifle or carbine. That's your 4 lakh, 5 lakh. If you talk about a rifle, you would need like, a million more, much more than that actually. When it comes to your specialized weaponry, the ones used by, let's say, your special forces in the military, the ones used by the NSG, the ones used by the SPG, for example, do you think ultimately we might also end up reaching a stage that the specialized weaponry that they use might also end up getting designed and developed in India?
Oh, it's already happening.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a spokesperson for Triple S Defense, Vivek's a good friend, but they started by making sniper rifles, which is a very big thing to do.
Okay. Yes.
It's like, so this is a company, very interesting. Again, look, manufacturing, precision, engineering. They were making springs, right? They're one of the world's largest spring manufacturers.
All right.
Triple S. And then they diversified into defense because it's an extension of what they did in manufacturing springs. So similarly, you have another company in Hyderabad, which is Lokesh Machines, right, which was making CNC machines. Again, precision engineering. They went into, so they manufactured the ASMI. So it's companies like this, private sector guys who are really good at what they do, then moving into this other sphere of weapons manufacturing. So precision weapons like the snipers, we are still taking our baby steps, but there are companies who are very hungry, they know, and they're investing in that. And they're very ambitious, like Triple S again. I'm saying it because they're putting their money where their mouth is, right? They're setting up a sniper school, for instance, where they want to train people in this art of sniping. We don't have a sniper school in India. I mean, it's tragic. It's true. The only major country in the world without a sniping school. We haven't paid enough attention to it. It's like, having an army of doctors, but no specialists. So that's the thing. Sniping is a very specialist thing. I think all of this will come in due course. We are already way behind the rest of the world. We're still playing catch up. But like you said, all the specialist weapons, the sniping weapons, the counter-terrorist weapons, all of that will come in. But we need to encourage the private sector, get them into this because they're hungry. They want to make a difference. They're not most of them are in it for the money. Of course, they are businessmen. They need to survive. Businesses need to survive. Can't do it without orders. But a lot of them are also doing it for the honor of producing weapons that will be used by the Indian military. So that's why born in Bharat, those kind of things. So they very proudly say this weapon is made in India, and that kind of thing. So there is a certain element of nationalism also in this. There is, of course, money is there. It is important, but there is that element of nationalism that Indian weapons for Indian wars and Indian soldiers, that kind of.
Yeah, right. And the final point. Let's forget what we spoke about on this episode for now. Considering what we have right now in terms of the Indian Army, from the basic infantry unit to your specialized units like the para-SF, your sniping units, to even out of the military, the NSG, the SPG, where do we rank in terms of the world of the quality of weaponry that we have? Your thoughts on that?
Quality of weaponry, I think, we wouldn't be in the top 10 for sure. Because I think, like I said, we're still very slow. And the biggest thing, and really bothers me a lot, is that we spend a lot of money in the weapons. And we have these Picatinny rails, which are actually like, it's a specialist rail that mounts scopes and devices. It's like your USB drive for firearms. We haven't invested in scopes. So we spend all our money buying these assault rifles. There are no scopes on it. There are no day-night scopes. There are no laser designators. There's nothing. Because then they realize, अरे यार, इतना पैसा खर्च हो गया इससे assault rifle में. Abhi there's no money left to buy the scope. The scope is...
That happened in 6 or if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, because you spend all your budgets in that. Nobody thought of getting a good scope. Because, it is like the eyes of a weapon. You put a scope on a weapon and it becomes something else. It becomes a smart weapon, literally.
Yeah.
Exactly like how the JDAMs and all that. Well, basically dumb bombs with a guidance kit, right? It becomes a smart weapon. You need to invest big time in scopes, sensors for your weapons, all of that. That isn't happening either. So we're so focused still in that Second World War thing that, we haven't kind of moved up the thing to say that, look, our soldier needs the best. He needs scopes, he needs sights, he needs thermal imaging sights, all of those things. They say, oh, no, it's so expensive, it's costlier than the rifle, But that's like the eyes of the weapon. You put that on a thing and the soldier suddenly becomes more powerful than he was with a normal weapon, So stuff like that. And I think we have some catching up to do there when it comes to the accessories on a weapon, for instance. And this will all come in again when you get more private sector in, when you widen the entire thing, rather than keeping it to just one or two government organizations. You need to widen the scope a bit, get more players in, have more public, private partnerships, interactions between the military, at that level that you're pushing your drones and all that, you need to do it for your small arms as well.
Yeah. Right. I think we'll end it there. Fantastic chat, Sandeep. Like I said during the middle, I think you are really into this topic, and that came across on this episode.
Yep.
I'm really, really glad I could have this chat with you, because this question, like I said, why does India not have its own rifle, has been there for three seasons, and I think
it is. We're getting there. We're getting there.
I think with this episode, we've sort of closed the loop now in terms of fully understanding of why we are where we are, but the good future that we're staring at right now, that is waiting for us. So thanks, Sandeep. Great chat.
As always.
Yeah. And thanks to all our listeners and viewers. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with our passport. Bye-bye.